Get a thumbs up from the steering committee. All right. So thanks for joining this Alberta Citizen Science Community of Practice meeting. I think everyone should already be muted, and we're going to be submitting any questions that we have throughout the session in the chat, so you should have access to the chat function in the system. And also, I just want to note that we are recording this session, and it will be available on our website at CitSciAlberta.ca after the session. So I'll introduce myself. So my name is Ashley Meek, and I'm with Alberta Environment and Parks Office of the Chief Scientist. And I'm this year's chair of the Alberta Citizen Science Community of Practice Steering Committee. And before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that I'm currently situated on the territories of Treaty 6 nations, a traditional gathering place and traveling route for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. So today is meeting number 5 for our community of practice. And for those of you just joining us for the first time today, you can catch up on some of the previous meeting video recordings on the website. And we'll post that up a little bit later. The community of practice was launched in 2021. And it's a group of individuals and organizations from across Alberta that are committed to working together to advance citizen science through the creation and exchange of knowledge and experiences. The primary goals are to promote and showcase the development and application of good practice, to connect learning to action, to elevate the profile of citizen science in Alberta, and also to foster support and collaboration amongst community members and organizations. We have a small but mighty team helping to build the community and plan meetings. Our steering committee includes many of the people on the call today. So myself, Bradley Peter, Catherine Pierce, Colin King, Justine Toppin, Tracy Lee, and Krista Tremblett. And if any of you are interested in joining the steering committee for this year or next year or into the future, you can just let us know by sending an email to info@CitSciAlberta.ca. So these are some of the ways that you can get in touch with the group. So that we have a website at CitSciAlberta.com. You can join our mailing list. Everyone attending should already be subscribed. We have a Slack channel, and of course through email. And we are building out right now an Instagram and Facebook page, so we'll have more info on that pretty soon. So when everyone registered, we asked you what was your favorite winter activity, and this is what came across very strongly. So in order to get to know some of you a little bit better, please go to menti.com, and either with the QR code or using the code that's provided below, we just like to go through a couple of get to know you questions. And Justine, can you share your screen in a few seconds so that we can see the responses to the first question? I can't see you, Justine, so. There we go. Okay, I see we're starting to get a couple of responses coming in. So the first question is about your affiliation. So we've got quite a few nonprofits, academic, some government. Yeah, and the code is at the top. I can also put it into the chat for those of you who have missed it. I'll put a link into the chat. Oh, it's not allowing me to. Okay, so looks like we're majority nonprofit. One other. I'm always curious what the other is. Justine, can you go ahead to the next question, please? There we go. So if you were to describe your primary area of focus, would it be water, air, biodiversity, climate, or other? We have a big biodiversity crowd today. In our previous meetings, we were getting a lot of water, and now it looks like it's evening out. Okay. If you did put other, if you wouldn't mind, I'd be curious to see what you would describe as other in the chat. Yeah. Justine, I think you can hop to the next question. Okay, and so today we're going to be talking about winter citizen science. So what comes to mind when you think of winter citizen science? Dedication. I love it. Snowflakes, yes. New frontier. We can get on board with the marshmallows as well. Safety, yeah, that's really good. I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later on today as well. Beautiful lakes. All right. Okay, and then I think we have one final question before we are able to go. Oh, no, I think we maybe missed one. There we go. Have you ever participated in a winter citizen science project? Lots of yeses. Well, I guess we do live in Alberta, so. Okay. Some no's, some would like to's. The no's, I'm curious if it's definitely not a, if you're, we're going to be presenting some winter citizen science projects where you don't actually have to get cold. So, so stay tuned. Okay. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen again, Justine. We can get into this. All right. So for those of you who have participated in winter science, I guess my question to you is, do you look for projects that you can do indoors, or are you the type of person who bundles up and ventures outside to participate in citizen science? I'm just going to show a couple of really interesting projects that I've seen. Some of these inspired this this community of practice, and I'm not sure if some of you may be familiar with them. So I just wanted to present, this is a project called Hearts in the Ice, and it was created by Hilda Strom and Suniva Sorbi, and it's a platform for social engagement, connecting students, scientists, manufacturers, environmental organization, and others. So these two women, they stayed for 18 months in a remote historic trapper cabin in the high Arctic on the 78th parallel in Svalbard, Norway. And on this adventure, they collected data for and observations for NASA, British Columbia Institute of Technology, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego, and their research included more than 50 close polar bears encounters with poop samples, more than 22 pre-programmed drone flights, 16 ice core samples, 16 saltwater samples, phytoplankton samples, 21 cloud observations for NASA, and a rocket launch photo capture. They observed wildlife ranging from Arctic foxes and caribou to beluga and minke whales, puffins, and bearded seals. So their next expedition they're going to be heading to the Canadian Arctic, and they're currently preparing and developing partnerships. And this adventure is set for 22-23, so have a look out for them. Another one, if you're not quite that adventurous in the winter, is called RinkWatch. So this is a Canadian initiative, and some of you may be familiar with this. And they're asking citizen scientists who love outdoor skating to help environmental scientists monitor winter weather conditions. So it was launched in January of 2013 with Wilfrid Laurier University. And they have information on more than 1,400 outdoor rinks and ponds now. They've published in Canadian Geographer, and other information with the data that was captured on this. So anybody can register if you want to monitor your home rink or pond. And the last one, this one you can do inside, and this one is one of my favorites. This one is called Penguin Watch, and it's set up with cameras using the Zooniverse platform. It allows researchers to sort through more than 200,000 penguin images. They have close to 60,000 volunteers on it, and they've done over 1 million classifications using this format. And the images are taken throughout the year at multiple locations. It allows the scientists to answer an interesting range of questions and to check chick survival, breeding success, and how this varies across species and between years. So those are just a couple of examples, and we are going to be hearing from our 4 panelists on their projects inside in Alberta and beyond. And then we will get into our conversation. So for our panel today of Tales of Snow and Ice, Citizen Science in Alberta's Winter, we have Nicole Cahal from the Mustaki Institute, who's going to be talking to us about frosty friends captured on camera. We have Erin Neve, who is with Environment and Climate Change Canada, who's going to be talking to us about IceWatch. Bradley Peter, who is with the Alberta Lake Management Society, Winter LakeKeepers, and Stephanie Weisenbach with Nature Alberta, who's going to be talking to us about the Christmas bird count. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Nicole. And just have to quickly change. I'm going to stop sharing my slides. Oh. Navigating between screens here.
Does that look good, Ashley?
It does look good. Yes, I will just do your quick introduction here. So Nicole is a conservation analyst with the Mustaki Institute, a registered charity based in Calgary that undertakes applied conservation research to enable responsible and sustainable decisions to support biodiversity, ecological connectivity, and nature-based climate adaptation. Nicole manages the Calgary Captured Urban Wildlife Monitoring Program that aims to better understand species occurrence and movement in the Calgary region while engaging Calgarians in urban biodiversity. Calgary Captured provides opportunities to participate in citizen science through classifying the species found in images and maintaining wildlife cameras year-round in urban parks. Over to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to skip over that slide because Ashley did a great introduction to Mustaki. But I do want to acknowledge our amazing partners and funders on this project. Calgary Captured Wildlife Monitoring Program is a collaborative project. It was developed with the City of Calgary in 2017. They remain a partner today. All of our partners are end users of the data we're collecting. So it includes the City of Calgary, Alberta Environment and Parks, the Friends of Fish Creek Provincial Park Society, Weaselhead Glenmore Park Preservation Society, and we are currently funded by the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation, the Calgary Foundation, and Enbridge. And Calgary Captured, so we launched the project in 2017. It's evolved since then. We now have 4 main objectives. The first is to build knowledge on urban wildlife to facilitate the consideration of biodiversity in city management and planning. The second is to validate the use of wildlife corridors in the City of Calgary's ecological network. The City of Calgary has modeled an ecological network, and it's actually in their municipal development plan. And we have cameras located in 3 of the corridors that have been modeled to validate wildlife use, as well as to see if there's any differences in animal detections before and after development projects and big development projects that are occurring near these corridors. We are also working to determine the efficacy of wildlife road mitigation and provide recommendations for future investments. We have cameras located in underneath the bridge spans of the Stoney and Sutina Trail, the new southwest portion of Calgary's Ring Road. These areas have been mitigated to allow for wildlife movement. So we have cameras here to determine if wildlife are using them. We can look at detections pre and post development of these areas and provide recommendations on how to improve these if needed. And one of our main objectives is to engage Calgarians in urban wildlife. We want to continue to develop and support a cohort of Calgarians who are supportive of protecting biodiversity, knowledgeable about the importance of ecological connectivity, not just for wildlife, but for humans as well, because maintaining ecological connectivity does require investments. And so our community needs to be supportive of those investments. And so we have two main ways that volunteers, citizen scientists, contribute to this program. So the first is we have citizen scientists that brave the cold. These are our camera crew volunteers, we call them. They are actually Friends of Fish Creek volunteers. The Friends of Fish Creek runs this program and trains these volunteers. And they go out in groups of 2 and they adopt a camera route that has between 2 and 4 cameras. And they visit these cameras monthly to maintain the SD cards, make sure the SD cards get swapped out and change the batteries. Monthly is more often than the batteries usually need to be changed, except sometimes in the winter it gets really cold, the batteries run out. But we're in an urban environment, sometimes cameras get stolen or people turn them around. Sometimes we've had snow, snow cover a camera in the summer, grass. So just this regular presence at these cameras helps to make sure that we don't lose months and months of data if something does go wrong with these cameras. So these are very dedicated volunteers. As I mentioned, it's year round. I don't know if you could see that, but I zoomed in. This picture of coyotes, it's minus 28 degrees Celsius. So if you're like me and you don't enjoy being outside in the winter, and maybe you're a bit of an introvert, your citizen science journey with Calgary Captured could look more like this. We have a group of volunteers that Misaki trains to help tag the photos found on the cameras to species. And so we use the ABMI's platform called Wild Tracks. It's completely online, amazing interface that's really easy to use. We have a lot of the volunteers that maintain the cameras at the Fish Creek Provincial Park also volunteer and to tag the images found in the cameras that they maintain. But we do have a cohort of volunteers that help us completely online. And so this data that the volunteers help to collect, I'm just going to go over some of the results that we get from some of this data. So from our first 3 years of data, this map shows where the highest wildlife activity was found. About 76% of the photo events that we captured were of humans and dogs, which isn't surprising. We're in Calgary, this is an urban area, and the remaining 24 were of wildlife, ranging from black bear to weasel, and mostly deer and coyote, not surprisingly. Every park that we monitored in Calgary did have deer and coyote, but the rare species for Calgary, like cougar, black bear, and moose, were predominantly limited to those areas closer to the city boundary. And the species diversity were highest in Fish Creek Provincial Park, Griffith Woods, and Weasel Head Glenmore. These are larger urban parks that are connected via our river pathways. We also found that wildlife is more active at night in locations that have more human and dog activity. This relationship was weak for species like deer and coyote. These species are very adaptable to human environments, but carnivores, particularly cougar and red fox, visited Calgary's parks almost entirely during nighttime hours. So that's just some of the results that this data is helping us to inform. And we're also, as I mentioned earlier, we're now monitoring some road mitigation areas. So these are some types of images that volunteers are helping to classify what species are moving under these areas. And so I did mention we have those 2 ways to participate. So the first way is with the Friends of Fish Creek volunteer. They run their program and volunteer training. We do ask for a 1-year commitment for these volunteers, and it's been great. A lot of the volunteers have been doing the same camera route since the project began, and as they leave, they'll train the next group that's taking over their camera route. And then the Mistaki volunteer is a bit more informal. We ask for about a 6-month commitment, completely online. We do get a lot of participation during the winter and the online version, primarily because we have a lot of students' interest. We are located at Mount Royal University, and during the school years when we get a lot of student interest and volunteering. And so we just ask volunteers to contact me directly to set up a training to get set up on wild tracks. And that's about it for Calgary Captured. Feel free to check out our website. We have some graphics that display some of the results that we found so far and what we plan to do in the future as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole. And our next panelist is Erin Neve with Environment and Climate Change Canada. And Erin works, Erin Neve works for the Wildlife and Landscape Science Directorate of Environment and Climate Change Canada's Science and Technology branch. Her work supports research on habitat for species at risk, and she also helps to manage the citizen science modules under the naturewatch.ca platform. This includes IceWatch.ca that aims to monitor the changing climate through citizen observations of freeze and thaw dates of lakes and rivers across Canada. So over to you, Erin.
Great, thank you. You can hear me all right? Good. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, for inviting me to join today. As Ashley mentioned, my work helping out with the IceWatch program is really only a small part of my job, but it's a part that I thoroughly enjoy. So I really appreciate the opportunity to join all of you today in this discussion and to represent our broader program. You go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just for a bit of background, IceWatch is actually just one of a group of citizen science modules on our naturewatch.ca platform. We have a few that focus on monitoring species distribution, so that includes our Frog Watch program, as well as a Worm Watch program and a relatively new Milkweed Watch program. And then there's two of our programs that look to track seasonal changes in the phenology of natural processes over time. So that includes Plant Watch that tracks flowering times for selected indicator species. And of course, it includes the IceWatch program with the focus of tracking ice on and ice off dates. Both of these programs provide indication of changes in our environment that can be used to track climate change. Next slide, please. So how does IceWatch work? It's actually a really simple program. You can start by selecting a water body near your home, trying for one that's easy to access on a regular basis, even in the winter, or particularly in the winter. The water body can be small or large. There's no criteria on that front. And from there, you can select an observation point on land. Access is a key consideration. And of course, we don't want people wandering out onto the ice during the freeze up and break up stages. So a spot where you can view the water body from the land is critical. The area that you observe for ice on and ice off dates can be all or part of the water body, is demonstrated in the figure on the bottom of the slide. The important part will be to document in your entries what portion of the water body you have defined as your observation point. And there's basically two dates that we're looking for under IceWatch. So ice on, the date of complete ice coverage where the ice remains intact for the rest of the winter, and ice off, which is the date the ice goes out or completely disappears. So it's likely you'll have to go out on a daily basis during that critical period of time around these dates, as there will be transition periods with freeze and thaw cycles where it might freeze up and then thaw again. But ultimately, we're looking for the longest stretch where the water body is continuously frozen. So, those two specific dates sort of bracket the entire ice cover period. And then the final step, of course, would be to submit your observations to icewatch.ca, either through your phone while you're outside or at your home on your computer. The portal's fairly easy to use. You just need a username and password, and you can log in and input data as well as download data to do some investigating from a open science point of view. Next slide, please. So why is participation in IceWatch helpful to us at Environment Canada? I think the bottom line here is that the more information we can collect, the better. Impacts from climate change are variable across the country, and we have an inconsistently distributed system of weather stations across Canada with large gaps in our monitoring network, and especially in remote regions. So IceWatch data can fill gaps and provide an early indicator or first approximation of change. And while the IceWatch program only really started in 2001, we have actually aggregated data from citizen scientists who were collecting ice on and ice off dates for years before that. So those long-term data sets that we were able to aggregate, particularly in the beginning, are particularly valuable. So next slide, please. So in the next few slides, I've pulled together some results from a national analysis of ice monitoring programs by Environment and Climate Change Canada and some partners. The analysis is over 10 years old. I apologize for that. It's likely time we work to update it, but I thought it was one of the few nice summaries that I could find that would give you a sense of what we have and what we can learn from the IceWatch data. Just for a bit of context, this analysis combines data from IceWatch with other data collected through historic ice monitoring programs managed by the Meteorological Service of Canada, as well as the Canadian Ice Service. So together, all this data amounts to about 950 sites across Canada. So starting with this table on the slide, I guess the key message is that most sites are experiencing earlier thawing dates, signaling a warming trend in the spring. So you can see in the red circle that 40 of the 258 sites had statistically significant trends indicating earlier ice off dates. And if you look at the total sites trending towards earlier breakup dates, that number rises to about 65%. So 5 of the sites had significantly later ice off dates, and I'll show you where some of those are in a few slides. Next slide, please. In this graph, the change in ice off dates was plotted from 1900 to 2006. So the straight line at 0 represents the median value in 1970, just to kind of give you an idea of where that break happens. The graph reveals that there was relatively little change in ice off dates up until about 1950, but from 1950 onwards, the rate of change really sped up, and it amounts to about 1 day earlier for ice off for every 7 years, projecting forward. So you can also see from the green and blue lines that there's greater variability in the more recent estimates of rates of change for lake ice breakup dates. So next slide, please. So the final figure that I'll share from this study is a map that shows the differences in warming trends across the country. I think the most relevant thing from this figure is that most of the sites that have experienced strong warming trends are concentrated in Western Canada, which of course is the home of this group. In particular, the sites that have significant trends for earlier dates of ice breakup showed an earlier ice off date that advanced 2 to 4 days per decade. So those would be the big red dots on the map. Next slide, please. I guess finally, I'll leave you with a snapshot of what you can do with our open database to investigate changes over time a bit closer to home. I've just quickly put together a couple of graphs showing some data from Wizard Lake, which is just southwest of Edmonton. I didn't test for significance in the trends, but you can see from the graphs that there's a long-term trend towards later ice on dates and also later ice off dates at this particular site based on the IceWatch data submitted by one of our IceWatch citizen scientists from 1973 to 2020. So ice on and ice off dates from across Canada are available in an open data format to download in spreadsheet in a spreadsheet with associated UTM coordinates for use by anyone who'd like to use them. We're really hoping that by being here today, that maybe we'll get some more recruits to start entering some local data into IceWatch. Next slide, please. It's my final slide. I've just included a link to our program and an email address for contact information. And if people have questions, you can send them to info@naturewatch.ca or you can discuss them later on in the roundtable discussion today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Erin. Sorry. Okay, and next, our next panelist is Bradley Peter. Bradley is the Executive Director of the Alberta Lake Management Society, and Bradley will be speaking on the Winter LakeKeepers program. This community-based monitoring program allows Albertans to monitor the health of their favorite water body from underneath the ice while recreating in the winter months. And so take it away, Bradley.
Okay, does that sound okay to you, Ashley? It sounds good. Okay, thanks. Okay, let me just present here. Perfect. Okay, yeah, thanks so much for the introduction and for putting the session together. Thanks, Steering Committee, for pulling it together. If you're not familiar with the Alberta Lake Management Society, we are a small charitable organization based in Edmonton, and we really work to improve our understanding of lakes and reservoirs and their watersheds from across Alberta. And most of our programs are running in the summer months. You can see how lovely it is to be on a lake in the summertime. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that most lake monitoring programs are happening in the summertime. This is when we tend to directly interact with water quality, when we're directly confronted with the symptoms of eutrophication, like a blue-green algae bloom, something like that, or invasive plants growing along the shoreline. So, you know, we have a lot of programs that are designed for the summer months, and that's really left a bit of a data gap in terms of seasonality in how we understand our lakes. We have a good understanding probably in the summer, but not such a great understanding in the wintertime. So our LakeWatch program is kind of our biggest program that was running or is running in the summer months. And we also have a LakeKeepers program. Originally this was a summer program, and this program is kind of a traditional citizen science program that allows us to get to lakes that are more remote in Alberta, lakes that are a bit further away from Edmonton. It's more traditional in the sense that we're training volunteers, we're providing them with equipment, and they're collecting samples from lakes on their own time. And it was really just a quick conversation with a summer student of ours who suggested that anglers in Alberta would be really excited to collect samples in the wintertime. We threw together a grant application, and we came up with our Winter LakeKeepers program. So it's fairly recent. It's only been around since about 2018, 2019. But like I said, it's filling a really important data gap on lakes in Alberta. And I think it's helping to dispel some of our preconceived ideas about lakes in the wintertime. I think myself included I had this idea that lakes went dormant in the wintertime, that they're kind of just sitting there waiting for summer to start up again. Winters when you just write up summer data. we really had this idea about winter lakes that I think was incorrect. So we now know just from a few years of doing this work that lakes are actually quite dynamic in the wintertime. There is influence from how thick the ice is, how much snow is on the lake. There can be fish kills in the wintertime if there's not enough oxygen in a lake. There can even be cyanobacteria blooming under the ice. So they're quite dynamic environments, and it's been exciting to develop the citizen science program to start to understand our lakes a bit better. And participation in the program has definitely not been an issue. This is probably our fastest growing program. And in terms of the number of sampling events within a fairly short time frame in the wintertime, it's becoming one of our largest programs. So you can see the growth of the program over the past 4 years in terms of the number of sampling events that were occurring. And this is happening at like 40 or 50 water bodies from across the province. So we've got a really good spread of locations that are being sampled as well. So how does it actually work? Our volunteers are receiving some online training. We offer a winter webinar. We also offer some safety training. So, or at least a safety quiz where participants have to demonstrate some understanding of how to recreate safely on the ice. Once you've gone through a couple administrative steps, then you can pick up equipment at our office, or we can send equipment out to you. You then collect your samples. Maybe you want to do one lake, maybe you want to do a few lakes. And then you either ship the samples back to us or you drop them off at our office, and maybe you return the equipment as well at that time. So we really leave it up to the volunteers to sample when they would like to sample, and we're not really dictating when they have to sample, what lake they have to sample. We really want folks to be able to go out to a site that's of interest to them when they're able to go out and collect samples. We would prefer that samples are collected on a monthly basis. So if you want to do one lake over a season, then one sample a month is probably sufficient. So here's what it looks like when you're collecting samples. You do have to auger a hole in the ice. So that could be a limitation for folks, but we do have an auger at our office that we would be happy to loan out if you need an auger. You're provided with a water quality probe, sample bottles, a clipboard, and a field sheet. And so you're able to record environmental observations such as the ice thickness, the snow cover, the snow thickness, the ice color, the color of the water, things like that. You can use the probe to measure the oxygen and temperature from the top of the lake to the bottom of the lake. And then you can use a sampling glove to fill up the water quality containers. And here you see VN, one of our participants, recording the data on his field sheet. Once you've collected your data, if you're not coming back to our office right away, then we do ask you to filter your chlorophyll at your home, and that just helps to preserve the chlorophyll for analysis. So that has to be done within 24 hours, but once you've filtered it, you can throw the samples into your freezer and return them to us at any point throughout the season, really. So we've had great involvement from a diversity of stakeholders, WPACs, watershed planning advisory councils, watershed stewardship groups, anglers, and just individual stewards. It's surprising how many people want to get involved with the program who aren't doing winter fishing. So that's been really great to see. And we've got, Don Davidson here from the Pigeon Lake Watershed Association. He's not fishing while he's out there. He's actually just interested in collecting that winter data and understanding Pigeon Lake a bit better throughout the winter season. And speaking of stewards, we're about to embark this winter on a monitoring program with First Nation and Métis communities who are within Alberta's oil sands region. So it's been great to see this program kind of be adapted to support those communities. As well, like I mentioned, safety is important in this program. So the volunteer safety quiz, people can fill it on our website, an informed consent form, and making sure that participants are selecting the sample locations themselves because they know best what the ice conditions are like on their lake. So some special considerations included in this program. If you'd like to access the data, we're uploading the winter data onto DataStream, so you can download all the data there, or we've also compiled it into reports on our website. So you can check out the Winter LakeKeepers page on our website to download our most recent reports. So it's been a great program in a number of ways. We've been able to fill data gaps in Alberta's water quality data sets, which has been exciting. We've created a way for our stewards to be engaged all year long. We've tapped into a new audience of anglers who are excited to collect data while they fish. We've developed new partnerships, especially with the University of Calgary. David Barrett and Fred Rona have been great partners on this project, and it's really opened up new funding opportunities for our organization. And I should give a shout out to the folks at the Wabamun Watershed Management Council who have allowed us to just feature this photo all over the place. This is them sampling Wabamun last year. And thanks to the funders of this program, Cabela and Bass Pro Shops Outdoor Fund and Alberta EcoTrust have been great funders. And more recently, we've brought the ACA, the Alberta Conservation Association, on as a funder as well. And there's our team, Kirsten, Caleb, and myself. Kirsten and Caleb have done a lot of work on this program, especially last winter. Didn't even get into some of the projects they did with winter data, but there's lots more we could talk about there. So if you want to get involved, I encourage you to reach out to us. My email is on the screen and our website is there as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Bradley. And yes, thanks again for providing the photo for this event. The credit goes to Bradley. So next up, we have, hold on, sorry. Next up, we have Stephanie Weisenbach, and she is the Program Director for Nature Alberta, working to increase the greater appreciation and conservation of nature in Alberta and connect our community through a love of nature. So Nature Alberta supports 41 member clubs across the province through the Nature Network. Many of these clubs organize their local Christmas bird count. The Christmas bird count started in 1900 and is the longest running citizen science project in North America. So I will hand over to you, Stephanie, to fill us in on the rest.
Thank you so much for inviting me today to be a panelist. I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about Nature Alberta to give you some context. Then I'll tell you all about the Christmas bird count, and I'm going to sneak in a little bit of information about the winter bug count as well. Nature Alberta is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the greater appreciation and conservation of nature in Alberta. We support a network of 42 nature clubs all across the province. We provide them with resources and a support network and work with them on all types of projects, including a wide range of citizen science projects. Nature Alberta recently added a great deal of information and resources to our citizen science webpage, including a rationale and encouragement to use platforms such as eBird and iNaturalist for biodiversity citizen science projects. If you scroll down, there is a growing list of projects available for participation in Alberta. You can expand each project to see more information and follow the links to find more info and figure out how to participate. If you scroll a bit more down to the aquatic projects, we even have the Winter LakeKeepers on there as well. If you have a project you want to add to Nature Alberta's citizen science page, please send me an email. I can put the email in the chat after, and everyone's welcome to visit our Nature Alberta's citizen science page, and I'll add that link later as well. So one citizen science project that many of our nature clubs are involved in coordinating, or at the very least in participating in, is the Christmas bird count. The Christmas bird count started in 1900 and is the longest running citizen science project in North America. Thousands of Christmas bird counts occur around the world and contribute data to an immense database managed and analyzed by Birds Canada and the National Audubon Society. This is a screenshot of Birds Canada's interactive map of count circles. It's kind of zoomed in to all of the circles are close to Edmonton. Christmas bird counts are conducted within defined 24-kilometer diameter count circles, and they remain the same each year. Birders count birds on a single day between December 14th and January 5th. And of course, count week species are recorded in the results. So if one of the very dedicated birders is scouting their area earlier in the week, as we tend to do, and spots a species that is not recorded anywhere within the 24-kilometer circle on that day, it is recorded as a species in the count week results. You can participate as a feeder watcher from the comfort and warmth of your own home, or you can get dressed up in your warmest, most breathable and flexible winter gear and head out on foot as a bush beater to count birds along the trails, in parks, or in the field. Edmonton's Christmas bird count circle is split into several different zones to help coordinate volunteer efforts. I am the volunteer captain for Zone 8. That map is on the right-hand side. I coordinate efforts and compile the results from everyone in my zone. Being a zone captain gives you almost an odd sense of pride and responsibility to the birds in that zone. I actually don't live in Zone 8, but I live close to it. And anytime I drive into my zone, a sense of pride for the birds there washes over me. It's kind of a funny thing, but I believe this sense of responsibility and pride is one of the many things that makes Edmonton's Christmas bird count so successful. Edmonton has been continuously participating since 1955 and holds the world record for number of participants, with 1,288 birders participating in 1987. Edmonton also holds the world record for black-billed magpies, with 3,447 counted in 2020, and Bohemian waxwings number from 2005. Edmonton is also the black-capped chickadee capital in Canada, and each zone also has their own records that we keep for the circle. All of these records help create some competitive vibes, while also bringing everyone together as a team to see what we accomplished across the entire circle. It's a great camaraderie that used to be brought together at a potluck where we shouted out the numbers of birds in our zone and tallied the numbers together in person. Of course, this COVID switched the tally to a digital format, but hopefully maybe someday in the future we'll have another potluck. Compilers use the ABC species list. A is expected birds, B are difficult birds, and C are rare birds that have only been found 4 or less years in the last 20 years. Rare birds do require extra documentation and preferably a photo record. Without good documentation, a rare bird may not be accepted by Birds Canada for the count. Eagles are one of the unique birds in our zone that we write down some more details about. We record what the eagle was eating for lunch that day. No, I'm just kidding, but we do write down whether they were flying or perched, and if they were flying, what direction and what time and place the observation was made. This helps prevent quadruple counting of the same bird by multiple zones along the river valley in particular. Nature Alberta's Christmas bird counts page has a list of count circles in Alberta that you can participate in. This web page also has a link to the interactive Birds Canada map that I showed you earlier. And one last little tidbit, the Nature Alberta hosts Christmas bird counts for kids as well. These events help educate families about winter birds, and everyone heads out as a group to count birds with an expert birder. Where possible, these events also contribute to the Christmas bird count circle volunteer efforts. I also wanted to just make a quick mention about the annual winter bug count. It was started by John Acorn in 2011 to document arthropods, so insects, spiders, and crustaceans such as sow bugs in Alberta and Saskatchewan through December, January, and February. Accepted species include any free living arthropod indoors or outdoors, and it excludes pets, specimens, or pet food. So you can't take a picture of the cricket that you brought home for your pet chameleon. That one doesn't count. So this is a screenshot of the results from the 2021-2022 winter bug count. And to contribute to this year's upcoming winter bug count, you just include your observations on iNaturalist. So it's a great way to raise awareness for bugs that are scurrying around in your basement in the wintertime or on the snowbanks and stuff like that. So maybe instead of squishing that really gross centipede that's running across the basement, maybe you'll take a picture first and document it. So thank you so much for listening. I hope I've inspired you to count birds and bugs this winter.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I'm definitely inspired. Yeah, okay, so thank you very much to our panelists. And now we're going to be moving into oh, good, Colin's coming up. So Colin is going to be helping to facilitate our panel through some questions. So please, if you have any questions, just feel free to pop them into the chat. And I think Colin has a couple of questions to start us off. And Colin is also on our steering committee, Colin King, and he works for Inside Education.
Thanks, Ashley. And thank you all of our panelists for joining us and sharing a little bit about your organizations and your projects. It's really cool to see all the different things that you're doing. I know I certainly feel inspired to head outside and participate in some winter citizen science, even though it's nearly 20 degrees today where I am. Yeah, so I'll just start off with some questions. And again, I'll remind you, if you have questions you would like to ask the panelists, please put them in the chat. I'll be watching for those. But I have some questions that I have prepared to ask each of the panelists. So we'll start off with a nice and easy but big picture one for each of you. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities of running a winter citizen science project? And I will give it to Steph on my screen. You're first.
Sure. Definitely weather is something when you're setting a Christmas bird count date, you set that way in advance. And so if it's -30 that day, you definitely get less participation and there are less birds moving about as well. So weather is definitely the biggest challenge for the Christmas bird count.
Do you think have a biggest opportunity that you see in winter science?
Biggest opportunity, definitely collecting data on overwintering grounds for birds is an important piece of information when considering especially recovery strategies for at-risk species. It's an important piece of data that might otherwise not be available.
Awesome, thank you. Nicole, what about you? What are your biggest opportunities and challenges for winter citizen science?
Also say weather. Our climate is very harsh on equipment. So we can mitigate some of that by we use really high quality lithium batteries in our cameras and use high quality cameras themselves. And we did have a bit of a learning process there of finding the right equipment for the job.
Do you see a big opportunity for winter citizen science for you?
Yeah, I thought that winter was going to be a big deterrent for our volunteers to check the cameras, but it wasn't. They all think are out in the parks that they love year round anyway, so that wasn't. And we got a lot of awesome wildlife photos in the winter. There's less leaves and grass and vegetations covering the trail to miss opportunities for capturing those on camera. We found less people in the parks overall as well.
Cool, thank you. Bradley, I'll pass it to you. What are the biggest opportunities and challenges for winter citizen science for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because for sampling lakes, when it's winter time, you don't have to worry about waves, you don't have to worry about wind as much, you don't have to worry about like thunderstorms. So in some ways, lakes are just as accessible or more accessible in the winter time. And for people to be involved in the program, they don't have to own a personal watercraft, which is often a limitation to participating in our programs. They can just walk out onto the ice. So there's actually some improved accessibility in the wintertime. And like I said in the presentation, I think in terms of opportunity, there's such a data gap in Alberta on lakes in the wintertime. So there's a huge opportunity for us to start filling that and improving our understanding of lakes.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, Aaron, what do you think about opportunities and challenges for winter citizen science?
I think our program's pretty simple. Like you could do it from the window of your apartment if you can see a water body. So maybe something I'll mention from a challenge point of view is Nature Watch has been around for a long time, and it's sort of gone through various partnerships and various leadership, and it's probably the biggest challenge for us is keeping our programs on people's radar and letting people know that we still exist and we still want to engage and collect data towards some of these important questions. So I say really appreciate being here. I guess that's the opportunity, is to come and talk to people. But yeah, I guess it's kind of up to people how they collect the data, and it's nice that way because you could be doing it sitting on your front deck, or you could go for a walk to a local water body, but and not a huge challenge, hopefully, that way. So
awesome, thank you everyone. Okay, let's do a question from the audience then, from Tyne Baker. Hopefully I said your name there correctly. So for those of you who do winter and summer citizen science projects, do you find more interest from student groups and elementary/high school teachers for your winter programs? And this time we'll start with Nicole.
Yeah, during the winter school year, we get a lot of students that want to partake in our online species tagging on wild tracks for our photos. And students love that because they can do it from home. And we have some professors at Mount Royal University who promote the project to them.
Awesome, thank you. Steph, what about you?
I don't really interact specifically with the student groups, but there's certainly interest in both, I think, quite a bit. Like I said, there's a lot of interest we have in the Christmas bird count for kids. Last year we had to limit the participation still because of COVID considerations, so we had smaller groups, but we had all of the groups kind of sold out, and then we were handing out feeder kits for people to watch birds in their backyard. So there's certainly still a great deal of interest in the winter time as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I wonder, so from my perspective, Inside Education is a charity, and we work with students across the province on environment and natural resource topics, and one of our big things is connecting experts and students to talk about things, and particularly citizen science is an area of interest. And I feel like there could be a lot of potential for school groups to set up a feeder outside of their classroom and count birds for the winter bird count. I think there's a lot of potential there, which is very cool. Aaron, what about you?
In terms of students, I have to say I'm not really sure. I've been involved in Nature Watch for about 3 years now, and I would say during COVID, we've had a crazy uptick in interest from teachers on several of the modules. I haven't spoken to any teachers about IceWatch, but I find it remarkable the number that wanted information on Worm Watch, which is something that is more of an extension program than a monitoring program. But and yeah, similarly Frog Watch, we've had a lot of inquiries on that. So I would say yeah, I don't really know which is getting more, but we've certainly seen an increase in the last few years for sure.
Thank you. And Bradley, last but not least, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say with our LakeKeepers program and our LakeWatch program, we don't get a ton of involvement from elementary or high school students. I think you would need a pretty brave teacher to take their students out onto a boat or onto a lake in the middle of winter. But certainly if there are teachers on the call today who want some engagement on lakes, whether it's the summer or the winter, we have a lot of experience coming out to classrooms and helping to run educational sessions. So it doesn't preclude the involvement of those groups. They just historically have not been involved with our programs.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I have one more guest participant question, specifically for Stephanie. They say they may have missed it, but where does the data from the Christmas bird count go? Can you provide us an example of how that data is used by scientists?
Yeah, so the Christmas bird count results go to Birds Canada, a database that's analyzed and upkept by Birds Canada and National Audubon Society. I don't have any specific examples of how that data is being used, but I know that there are lots of research projects and things using citizen science more and more, including data that has been collected for the Christmas bird count. I know that there's been a large shift towards using eBird for our May species count, for example. As well, you can upload your lists for the Christmas bird count on eBird, which is also being used by scientists and contributing data to the large database that is eBird, and that's used in a number of ways. But the data is a little bit different. You have to kind of split it up if you're one of those super dedicated volunteers that is birding along a larger area. You'll want to split up your birding tally list. If you're at a specific hotspot or wetland, you would input your list there specifically on eBird versus in the forested trail and things like that. Hopefully that kind of answers the question.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just a reminder for viewers, if you have any other questions for individual panelists or for everyone, feel free to put them in the chat. I think that's all we got so far, so I'll return to my list of questions since I've got a whole bunch. So I would love to hear a little bit more from each of you about different safety precautions that you have to take. So I know some of you have talked about trainings and things like that you need to do, but I'd love to hear just a little bit more elaboration on what role safety plays in winter citizen science. And let's start with Erin.
Not a lot for me. I just I think I mentioned in my talk, we encourage people very strongly to find a spot to view ice on and ice off from the land, not wandering around on fresh ice or deteriorating ice. So, but that's kind of common sense, but it also is something we sort of strongly mention in our materials. So, but that's about it for me. So.
Right. Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, at a minimum, we ask the camera crew volunteers, citizen scientists, to go out in pairs and to avoid going out during bad weather. I think at a minimum. And I can't think of any particular safety precautions for our online volunteers, but Friends of Fish Creek has a whole volunteer training and safety protocols as well that I'm not personally involved in.
Of course. Thank you. Bradley, what about the volunteers that you give ice augers to?
Yeah, our program could be a little bit dangerous, I suppose. And we definitely considered that when we were designing the program. So, we're asking folks to collect water quality data from on the ice So one thing that we really from the beginning decided was that we wouldn't tell people where to collect the data from. So we don't know the local ice conditions on a lake. We don't know if there's a spring at one point on the lake that causes thin ice. But the folks who are collecting the data have that local knowledge, and they know where it's safe to go and where it's not safe to go. And we also wanted people to be collecting data from where it's meaningful to them. Like if they have a favorite fishing spot, then that's where they should be collecting their dissolved oxygen and temperature data. So from the get-go, we decided that we wouldn't dictate where samples were collected from, but we do have an online informed consent form, which really just lays out their understanding of the risks involved with the program, and that if they're using their own equipment for the program, that is their responsibility. And we do ask that anyone who participates in our program completes that informed consent form. And then we also request that anyone in the program gets 100% on an ice safety quiz. So it maybe is a bit onerous, but I think, you know, in some cases we've had volunteers come into the office and they sit at our computer and we walk through all of it with them in case it is kind of cumbersome for them to fill out an online form or an online quiz. So safety is kind of at the forefront for us when we're designing these programs. And I think we've, you know, as a volunteer organization or volunteer kind of driven organization, I think we've done a pretty good job at managing our risk with this program.
Thank you. And Steph, what about you with the Christmas bird count? I know for one thing that comes to mind, at least topically right now in terms of birds, is avian flu. So maybe you guys know that. Or what about your participants?
I don't think avian flu is overly relevant for the Christmas bird count necessarily. You're not really getting close enough to or handling birds in any way. So certainly the weather is a consideration, and especially for the nature, the Christmas bird count for kids, we sort of set a temperature, I think it's like -22, where we'll just chat about birds inside. And if it warms up a little bit, then we'll head out. But just providing the resources to go birding on their own. Kids have more sensitive skin, so it freezes a little bit quicker. So we don't want to lead a walk longer than someone can handle and beyond their comfort level, and not feel comfortable to say I'm too cold or turn around. So we just kind of have that little threshold where we make sure that we're not taking people out. Christmas bird count volunteers themselves can go out, and then they're kind of self-regulating their own frozen fingers and heading back in and taking a break, and they have all day to count, so that really helps. So aside from, you know, the cold, I don't think there's really anything else for the Christmas bird count.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we've all touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to maybe hear a little more on a bigger scale. Is what are some of the ways you would say your project can actually make a difference in the world? And I will start with Aaron this time.
That's a good question. I think particularly in Canada, really need to be monitoring ice conditions carefully in terms of how they're changing through time for our northern communities that are dependent on ice for travel and for subsistence harvest and those types of things. I mean, it's also a recreation issue in lots of areas in southern Canada, but looking at how ice is changing or deteriorating over time with climate change, I think is an important indicator. And I think just from a personal standpoint, getting out and monitoring something makes you care a bit more about it, and makes you care about the decisions you make on a day-by-day basis. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Nicole, what about you?
Yeah, that's a hard question, but I think that our cities, Calgary included, need to grow differently. We already know that. We already know there are areas we need to avoid. We already know how to grow more sustainably and protect ecological connectivity. But we're not connecting the right information to the right processes and decision makers. And so hopefully our project provides a little bit of the data that's missing, the information that's needed to help us with that change, that we can do things differently. And part of that is having Calgarians, people in general, recognize that there is wildlife in the city. You don't have to drive to the mountains to experience biodiversity, and that it's something worth protecting, not just for the individual animals' sake, but for our sake, for ecological connectivity, to protect our ecosystem services, that's a really complex, I think, connection for all of us to communicate, but we need that community knowledge and support if we're going, because it's going to take investment. It's going to take our municipal investment on our own part to make those changes.
Thank you. And Steph, what do you think? How does your project going to change the world?
Yeah, I think I already kind of touched on the Christmas bird count, how providing that information on overwintering grounds for birds is extremely important. And it's always interesting to see the different influxes of birds. When you have a cone year, suddenly you have all the birds who are eating cones and things like that. So seeing them move around with food availability is definitely interesting and important information in the conservation of species. I did want to talk a little bit about the winter bug count on this question here. I think that's really a great way to learn about bug species that we're finding in the wintertime, and also raise awareness for our little arthropod friends, because there's not a lot of spotlight on them, especially in the wintertime. And so I know, even personally, I'm not a big fan of spiders in my home. And last year, just thinking of the winter bug count, instead of automatically squishing that spider, I thought, oh, I should take a picture and actually appreciated and contribute this on a citizen science project. So I think it's a really great opportunity to raise some awareness for tiny biodiversity too.
Awesome, I love that. I like to think of myself as a friend to all the unloved and unappreciated critters of the world. I actually submitted a photo of a really large wolf spider I found up in southern Kananaskis in the Alpine. It was like this, larger than a toonie. It was the biggest wolf spider I've ever seen at that elevation. It was very cool.
Wow.
Last but not least, Bradley, how are you going to change the world through your citizen science project?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, but I think what stands out to me, at least from our winter program, is a little anecdote about our volunteers out at Wizard Lake, which actually Erin referenced Wizard Lake in her presentation. But at Wizard Lake, we had 3 generations of one family participating in the Winter LakeKeepers program on a monthly basis. We had the grandkids, the parents, and the grandparents would go out every month and collect samples together. And so I think it's kind of these intangible benefits of these programs and creating these opportunities for outdoor education that we can't fully probably ever wrap our heads around the benefits of that, but creating these opportunities for outdoor nature experiences, I think is really valuable. And I mean, from a lake management perspective, trying to understand the impacts that we're having on our lakes, particularly within watersheds, how we develop our watersheds, those kind of non-point source impacts that happen on our lakes. And looking for those impacts in the wintertime, I think can be really illuminating in terms of understanding the overall cumulative impact that we're having on our water resources. So, you know, everything from just getting a child out onto the ice and interested and involved to really improving our understanding of lakes, I hope is the impact that we're able to have.
Thank you. Okay, I got another audience question for Erin. Does NatureWatch Canada-wide link to other databases, for example, FrogWatch and Alberta Amphibian Monitoring Project? And then second part, is there a Gordon stream equivalent for biodiversity? And maybe you can fill me in because I do not know what that reference is.
I do not know that either, but I'll start with part one. Maybe we can ask Tracy to give us some information on that. That's a great question, Tracy. It kind of lends itself back to one of the comments I made earlier about sort of longevity of these programs, and NatureWatch has been around for a long time, and there's been different iterations of partners, and we're kind of in a phase right now where we need to re-establish some of those partnerships. So in some provinces, yes, there's ongoing collaboration, and in other cases, people have kind of for no bad reason, just sort of gone off and done their own thing. So I don't know what the future of that brings, but I think it's a really good question, and one that my management will need to have a look at moving forward. And we do take some pride in the fact that the NatureWatch platform it's a really heavily used webpage, and a lot of the other programs redirect to NatureWatch for species ID resources and other things. So some of those connections are definitely there, but not necessarily in a formal way anymore. So anyways, appreciate the question, and it's definitely on my mind as well. So
Thank you. And it looks like Tracy says that, Bradley, you should be able to answer the Gordon Water Portal. So why don't you tell us what that is?
Thank you, Tracy. So what she's referring to is the Gordon Foundation data stream portal. And so data stream is kind of a national repository for water quality data, and it's open source. So multiple groups are uploading their results to DataStream, and then anyone can jump onto this kind of map-based online platform and download that data for their own purposes. So I kind of wonder if something like iNaturalist or something like this would be almost the biodiversity equivalent of DataStream. I just don't know personally how easy it is to access that biodiversity data and download that raw data from iNaturalist, but maybe that's a similar type of platform.
Thank you. That sounds very, very interesting. I believe I saw a hand go up. It seems to have gone down. So that's another option if you would like to ask a question over voice. You could raise your hand and I will allow you to unmute. But I do not see a hand up anymore. So if you have one, go ahead and stick your hand up, raise your hand with that raise hand button. But otherwise, I will wait a moment. But otherwise, I have another question from my list that I can ask. Perhaps the raised hand was an accidental raised hand. Okay, so my question, since we may only have time for one more, we'll see how quickly you all answer this. My last question for you then, from me hopefully, is every time someone participates in a panel like this, I know I've been there. Sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for someone to ask me a question that I would really like to answer, and that person just has not asked me the question that I would like to give the answer to. So while you're sitting there thinking about your project, what is a question you would like to be asked, and how would you answer it? And I will start. I'm going to put someone on the spot here. Bradley is hiding his eyes, so we'll start with Steph.
Oh, that's a tough one. Does anyone else have an idea? Skip back to me. Let me think. I know that maybe how to get involved more or something like that. We have, Nature Alberta has a lot of great resources and are trying to link people who are interested in doing citizen science projects and tasks to projects, as well as volunteers who want to get out and help conservation. So Nature Alberta has started up a volunteer and job board, for example, on our website, as well as our citizen science project page. And we have a lot of posts that kind of cross both of those pages. And we also have a Nature Network speaker series going on all winter with lots of speakers who are presenting on different topics. And so one of them will be John Acorn in January, talking about the winter bug count and the different species that have been found so far, and some of that. So we definitely have lots of resources on our website, and you could sign up to be on our volunteer team to find out all of these different opportunities to hear about different projects ongoing, and then the same for anyone who has a really cool citizen science project that you want to raise awareness for and gain more participation. Definitely connect with me and I'll get it posted.
Thanks, Steph. I appreciate it. I definitely threw you on the spot there. So I love that you took charge and came up with an answer. Does anyone else want to ask the question to themselves? How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, well, I don't have the answer to my question, but I would ask, we're all reaching citizen scientists and building a community, but how do we reach, so a lot of the people that we're reaching are people who are already interested in nature, interested in, and they, they love the parks that they're visiting, the lakes that they're visiting. They love seeing wildlife, birds in their backyard. How do we reach the people who don't? And I don't have the answer to that, but I know there's a lot of people in Calgary who don't think that wildlife should occur in Calgary, that this is where people are. So they don't want to see coyotes. They get really angry even when bobcats walk through their neighborhood. And especially in a really polarized environment we are in right now, how do we reach those people? And I'm not sure.
Aaron or Bradley, do either of you have something you would like to ask yourself?
I mean, I can just maybe, one thing I didn't chat about was the interesting projects we've been able to undertake because of creating this opportunity. And I just want to give a shout out to our volunteer, Don Davidson, and our program manager, Caleb Sin, who undertook a really interesting project to install a buoy into the ice last winter, and it was collecting high frequency data all winter long. It was a really interesting project to be involved in, and we had some fun sawing that thing out of the ice at the end of the winter. Yeah, so I guess if there is a question, it would be just kind of like, what's an interesting project, or what's the most exciting thing that you've been able to do with this project? And I would give a shout out to that winter buoy project. And maybe if I can just throw something over at Nicole, is there an Edmonton wildlife winter camera program, or is it just Calgary?
Yeah, Edmonton does have a camera monitoring project. I'm not sure about if they have a citizen science program or not associated with it.
Okay, cool. I'll have to look into it.
All right. Aaron, this is your last chance, and if you don't have one, that's okay, because I think we are about ready to wrap up.
I don't really have one. I guess the question, the big question for us is how to sustain momentum when you have a program that's been around for a long time, and I won't answer that. I think coming to groups like this is hopefully helpful, and but yeah, anyways, over time maybe that'll be something that comes up for the rest of you as well. The Christmas bird count would probably have a good answer to that question as well, but bird people tend to be more engaged than frog and worm and ice people, but over time. But yeah, we've had some very dedicated ice watchers, but we're definitely very keen on recruiting more people. So I'll leave it at that, because people, you're right, it's getting close to the end. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much to all of you for participating and during my questions and putting you on the spot. You did fantastic. So we really appreciate you sharing with each other and sharing with all of our attendees. I'll bring attention to the chat to close out our meeting. We would like you to return to Menti. So if you have it open from before, that should work still, or you can re-click that link or enter the code. And we would like to know what future topics you are interested in for community of practice meetings.
All right, starting to get some great answers here. Sounds like we're going to have to come up with something to do on spiders. Colin, I will leave you in charge of that. I remember that was I did in elementary school, I did a science project on spiders and everyone thought I was absolutely nuts, but I stand by it. Okay, so thank you so much to all of our panelists. I learned a lot and I've been really inspired to get out and just waiting for snow since we haven't had any. No, I'm knocking on wood. It's great to see that people are so engaged and we're really looking forward to planning our next year of presentations for the community of practice. So I would encourage everyone to continue to interact with some of the opportunities we have available to interact with the community of practice. There's the Slack channel through the webpage, and we are going to be starting up a couple of social media sites. So we do have an Instagram page. I'm just going to ask Justine to come on for a second if she can. Poor Justine. She has that information. So
on the spot.
Yeah. So for the Instagram is CitSci Alberta. That's correct? Yes. And then the Facebook page we'll put into the chat here, but you can find us by looking up Alberta Citizen Science. And I think with that, we will close out today's meeting, and thanks to everyone, and thanks again to all of our panelists, and good luck to everyone as they start moving forward with their winter citizen science projects. Thanks.